formed the way planets like Earth do, as a big ball of cosmic junk. Something or enough things smacked into it to melt it. It got spherical and stratified, and the dense stuff went to the middle, and the medium stuff formed the surface, and the light stuff formed the atmosphere. That atmosphere would totally have killed you. But eventually it cooled down enough so that there were rocks, so that there were water. We talked about the experiments that have been done in this setup and a more modern one to show how the first organic building blocks of life might have come about spontaneously. That's a pretty plausible scenario. But as far as how the first cells form, we have much less to go on. We have basically a big old, I don't know, except for you can get these kind of baby steps to cells to form spontaneously. So we've seen microspheres. And the prevailing theory is that RNA would have been a much better first genetic material than DNA, because it can do more jobs. DNA is basically just information storage. RNA can take shapes like proteins do and actually, catalyze reactions and make stuff happen. So probably RNA was the first genetic material. That's what we've got. There's not, nobody's actually created life, gotten life to spontaneously form in a lab situation.
So, like in all the movies, it's like the cavemen who are around with like dinosaurs. That's not true, right?
Right. It's not true. Right. Dinosaurs well before humans even, well before even any primates. 65 million years ago is your last dinosaur-ish thing. And at that point, we're just looking at little rodent-like males.
Yeah, but then after the asteroid hit, did the Earth kind of just like redo?
Well, so I don't want you to get the impression that that asteroid was the only thing of its type in Earth's history. What you're going to learn in a day or today and tomorrow is that periodically throughout the Earth's history, we have these huge disasters that wipe out most of life on Earth. It's sort of a normal thing. So that was just one of many of those. Absolutely. Yep. Will. It's just when.
Don't know when.
We'd like it to be a few million years from now. Yeah. All right. Next on the agenda, we've got cells. However we got them. And the next step is photosynthesis. Right? That process you already know some stuff about, where you use chlorophyll because it's so good at getting electrons excited via sunlight, right? Then you bounce those electrons around to make, eventually, glucose out of carbon dioxide. Neat trick, right? The first living things probably, many of them probably did that chemosynthesis thing you saw at the bottom of the ocean in that video, but this is easier. You don't have to be down where the hot sulfur is for photosynthesis. You just have to be, in the sun. Pretty great. What comes with that, because photosynthesis is such a big advantage, and you can basically picture, we're just one-celled here, but you can basically picture the oceans filling up with photosynthesis bacteria, photosynthetic bacteria, is now what comes out of all these photosynthetic bacteria that is nice for us? Yeah, oxygen. Free oxygen. Right, obviously there was oxygen before as a part of water and other compounds, but we're talking about free oxygen, O2, the gas.
Say I eat like a ton of plants, like my skin just turns green from all the chlorophyll. I go outside, can I photosynthesis?
No. Your best bet is to use something like CRISPR to get little chloroplasts into your cells. You're gonna need some sort of symbiosis type thing going on, which is coming here. Free oxygen wasn't there, and then it was. Right? It wasn't in the early atmosphere at any, but like a trace percentage. And so as those oxygen levels increase, because the number of photosynthetic bacteria increase because they're winning, first thing that happens since life is still only in the water is that there's a whole bunch of free iron in the water at the time. The oceans would have been kind of rusty looking. And what dissolved iron does when oxygen gets to it and oxidizes it, oxygen is super reactive as an element, is iron oxide, which you know as rust. And so that iron would have oxidized and fallen out of solution, and that's right about when the oceans would have turned blue. How do we know that there was iron in the early oceans? Well, because you can find that layer of sediment at the right place in the strata, at the billion or so, no, sorry, 3 billion or so years ago level, there's huge deposits of iron, right? And that's, what's the word I'm looking for? Consistent with the oceans oxidizing all that iron and dropping it down. What was your question, Dave?
I was gonna ask, I thought the oceans were blue because the sky was blue and it was reflecting.
Oh, I must be them in there. Yeah, so not exactly. It's partly that, but also it's the way that water kind of refracts and reflects the light. After it saturates, or gets to the concentration it is in the ocean, then it oozes out into the air, and we get the ozone layer. And our current lovely shade of blue sky, unless you live in Ohio.
Lovely shade of gray sky.
Grayish. Hazy in the summer. Like I said, oxygen is super reactive. It loves to steal electrons from things. That's why it's so good at the end of your electron transport chain. But what it did first when it accumulated in the oceans is kill a bunch of stuff. Oxygen is not good for a lot of those bacteria that were there on the early Earth. And so most of them died out from that oxygen. The ones that survived are the ones we find today in those kind of early Earth-like places with no oxygen. Bottom of hot springs, hot sulfur vents, bottom of swamps, those places are where we find them. The rest are extinct. But a lucky few managed to accumulate the mutations that you now can be so proud of, where we actually take oxygen and use it, right? To keep our electron transport chains from getting backed up and to make, 30, 20 times the ATP that a cell without oxygen can make it. What's a good way to say what we use oxygen as? You remember how we said it? You should write this down. Final electron acceptor in the electron transport chain. Final electron acceptor in the electron transport chain. Almost there. We got photosynthesis, we got oxygen, we got cell respiration. We're still just prokaryotes though, right? Still just bacteria. So let's get the rest of the way to the Cambrian explosion. Let's get to eukaryotes, which is about 2 billion years ago that we see fossilized cells with evidence of internal membranes where they've they've figured out how to fold their membranes in and make things like the ER and the nucleus. Then we have endosymbiosis. Do you remember that? Remember the idea that a big bacteria and a little bacteria. The big bacteria is good at eating by folding its membranes around stuff. Little bacteria is good at, say, digesting, getting energy out of the food. And so if this thing swallows this thing, and this thing is eating more than it can digest, and this thing is making more energy from food than it can use, they both get benefit. That's the endosymbiotic theory. Remember, that's how cells got chloroplasts and mitochondria. Remember that we have the evidence for that in the DNA that chloroplasts and mitochondria have. It looks just like archaean DNA. The ribosomes look like bacterial DNA. They divide like bacteria. So now we've got eukaryotes, right? But they're still just single-celled. They're still just reproducing by dividing. And so what's left is sex and multicellularity in that order. Sexual reproduction. Which starts with a bacterial behavior called conjugation, which isn't quite sex, and then evolves into actually creating cells that merge to form offspring, and that meiosis stuff that scrambles up the DNA. And remember, it speeds up evolution because why? Produced by more variation from sex because of crossing over, independent assortment that happened during meiosis. Good. We keep coming back for a reason. It's important. A few 100 million years later, the first truly multicellular organisms, animals, the direct ancestors of sponges. And that sets up what we call that Cambrian explosion. This it's not a real explosion. It's not one of those space impacts. It's a really fast diversification, a really fast spreading out of all these groups as they change faster and faster because of the diversity. It's like in the fossil record, if you kind of watch, it's like somebody pressed fast forward at that point. Suddenly things are changing so fast, it looks like they're just, you know, strobe light. And that gets us as far as I want to take you myself, right? That gets us from Earth forming all the way to things that look a little more familiar to you, right? To actual animal groups. Questions? That's pretty good. It's not that pollen hates you, it's that your immune system hates pollen.
Seriously, like why does that?
Larger question of why are there allergies is a very good one. The current thinking is that basically your immune system used to have a lot more to do. There used to be a lot more parasites that you were fighting. And now that there aren't, it's basically your immune system getting bored almost. It's called the hygiene hypothesis. It's the thing that kind of leads people to think maybe everything being antibacterial isn't necessarily a good thing, that the more you're exposed to, the less your immune system might do that. People have even, in extreme cases, gone so far as to infect themselves with parasites and had that actually make their allergies go away. People had really severe ones, and I'm not condoning that at all, but it's an interesting story. Yeah.
This exact topic, which was the last topic, but yesterday I heard someone say that because they were born early, that affected their vision as they grew older.
Prematurely, you mean?
Yeah.
Could be. I don't know a ton about the long-term effects of premature births. I just don't. So I can't say whether that's true or not. Okay, that's this material. There's more I want you to know, but for now I'm going to give you the sample essays. Those will be due Friday, which is currently scheduled as our test day. I think we'll do that. There's a slight chance it could get rescheduled, depending on what's going on.
That means tomorrow, because
It would mean tomorrow Kahoot Day, yeah. Just depends. I got a couple things I want to see. We'll see if I want to squeeze them in before or after.